Welcome back to Veronica Live, and we're here with retired Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Sweazey, and he is the founder and president of Walk the Talk Foundation, and you are taking on fighting for our military members that have, been, I guess, caught in the crosshairs when it comes to the Inspector General office. Something, has gone wrong with them in the military, and they've gone to the IG office for help, and it's not always going their way, and I wanted to have you back to see how it's going because I follow you on LinkedIn, Ryan, and you're always putting all kinds of op-eds out there fighting for these service members. So I had to have you back. So welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. Appreciate it, and good to be back.
Yeah, so let's start with your story and why you started the Walk the Talk Foundation. You're the founder and president of this important organization.
Yeah, so I used to be an inspector general myself in the Air Force when I was active duty from about 2013 to 2016, and I saw a lot of the shortcomings of the system. And then I saw the flip side of that coin when I was a victim of reprisal when I was in the Defense Intelligence Agency towards the end of my active duty career. And the main issue I saw was that there is this avenue which purports itself to be independent and looking out for the individual service member, but in reality, it's just another arm of the military institution's command influence. The individual complainant, who is usually a victim, really has the deck stacked against them when they're trying to seek justice for administrative, not criminal matters, because they have no representation, they have no counsel, they get no advisement, they get nothing, and they have to veritably prove their case pro se, as the lawyers say, like on their own, against this entire government juggernaut, which is typically poised to defeat them, so to speak, to discount, discredit their story, and rule against them. So because of that, I started the foundation, and we just basically walk people through these confounding, difficult, bureaucratically laden processes because nobody else is on their side. They don't get a military lawyer. If they want representation, they have to pay for it out of pocket. It's really kind of sad, actually, how the military sets them up for failure, and our foundation works to help them, hopefully, to success.
Well, and on your website, you had that you've had 208 clients come to you, and so tell me how that's going, and you still have 29 open cases now that you're involved with. I mean, that's a huge number, and as you were saying, these military members, there's nowhere else for them to go, and a lot of times, to hire a lawyer is a lot of money too. It's just too much.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We have way too many cases for the bandwidth that we can take on, and it's a myriad of things that are contributing to that. Number one, like you said, people can't afford to keep a lawyer on retainer, and a lawyer in a lot of administrative processes doesn't really do much. They don't have any more leverage than the normal service member does. They can't compel the military to act faster or act in better faith or what have you. So it's kind of money, I don't want to say wasted, but something just short thereof. And we also have a lot of clientele because, to my knowledge at least, we're the only foundation that does this. And it's a constant stream of people coming to us. And it all follows the same pattern, which is I was wronged. I'm trying to seek redress or justice, and the system is pummeling me, working against me.
Well, I guess one of the things I was really interested in, Ryan, as I was reading all these op-eds that you've written, was the upper echelon people in charge, the generals, they don't seem to care about changing and fixing the system, because once you reach those positions, it's about me. So talk about that.
Yeah, that's been the most disappointing and enlightening thing all at the same time to watch. So the foundation work, we obviously aren't firsthand witness to the events themselves, why people file complaints or file allegations, but we are firsthand witnesses to as they go through the process seeking redress. And time again, and it really confounds me, especially in this day and age where we're hurting to recruit, we're hurting to retain talent. But at the end of the day, when someone goes to an upper echelon senior officer, more oftentimes than not, there is a mutually exclusive decision, which is to decide or to side with the individual member and truth, justice, the American way, et cetera, or the side of protecting the sanctity of the institution. And unfortunately, many times it's the latter. It's, okay, at the expense of your psychological, mental well-being, many times personal well-being, professional well-being, we are just going to unsubstantiate your claim and move on, because to substantiate would be to admit culpability or fault on behalf of the military, and that is something that we refuse to do. And that's what's so unfortunate about so many of these cases.
Right.
Ryan, do you think the issue is that the General Officer Corps has become basically a political operation more than a military operation? And I say that, starting with Milley, where he was basically saying, hey, I'm in charge, and I don't have to pay attention to the President of the United States, I can operate independently. And if, he wants to launch it, Trump wants to launch a nuke attack, I'm going to stop it. It's just, the behavior is so outrageous and so far beyond what our Constitution allows the military to do. What's driving that mentality in the officer corps?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, John. They operate with impunity. Is impunity defined? It is the zero accountability General Officer Corps now, and I could rattle off a dozen laws that they brazenly disregard fairly consistently nowadays. And I think it's a matter of the fact that we kind of quip a lot of times that the Department of Defense has become the Department of Defense of itself. It is indicative of an institution that now exists first and foremost, not for the defense of the nation, sadly, not for the welfare of the individual, but for its own continued survival. And it can do that because no other branch of the government holds it in check anymore. Congress has proven itself to be completely impotent when it comes to holding these people to account. Even though they're violating the laws and the Constitution of the United States, they do so to no account. And now you're seeing the result of that an organization in the Department of Defense that has just completely wandered off the reservation because it was allowed to. And now here we are.
Well,
I've had personal experience in that regard, with export licenses and stuff where, I go to the Department of State and get an export license and then go to DOD and say, here's an export license for this military technology. And DOD tells me, you can't export it. I say, but state said I can export it. And DOD says, nope, we're not going to let you. And then you go back to state and they say, well, they don't really have the authority to do that, but we can't stop them from not doing that, not following the law. And it's like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, and here's the scary part is that when you see an institution like the military that has now a monopoly on the truth, and that's what's frightening to me, is that they determine the sky is green, and to question that is to invite punishment, and it doesn't change anything. And it's almost, you kind of chuckle because it's almost North Korean regime in that regard. Like we will tell you what the truth is, and no one is going to call that into question. And if they do, they're met with their demise.
Well, you wrote one of your little op-eds was your recent one, a call to boycott the military, and on LinkedIn people were getting mad. And one of the facts, reading all of your content was, and it's just mind-boggling, the military sexual trauma. I guess 1 in 3 women are harassed or assaulted, and people are kind of like turning a blind eye to this. Luckily, I never had that happen to me. But recently, Senator Martha McSally, a former fighter pilot, said she was assaulted by a superior officer. So, obviously this has been going on for a long time. So there's, don't join the military, and the women being assaulted issue is very scary. But I see why you're saying this.
Yeah, there's a lot of kerfuffle about the boycott, but my counter to that is, so what else is going to incite change? So we look at the past 30 years now. Okay, let's talk about the military sexual trauma issue, because I think that's very indicative. 30 years of our service women and men being assaulted, abused, raped. And what do we have to show for it after all this legislation, millions and billions of dollars dumped into these sexual assault program offices, training and attention? What do we have to show? A quote-unquote independent investigative arm now, which is still under the DOD. It's a joke. It's total farce. But that's indicative of how unwilling the military is to change of its own volition. So I asked these people, like, oh, you can't have a boycott. That's preposterous. Well, what else? What other leverage do we have? It's not the Congress. It's not the press. It's not people spouting off on social media. None of those avenues, which have maybe in the past been effective, will no longer affect change in the military. They are just ineffective. So what do we have left? The only problem that can't be ignored, which is the recruiting crisis. If there aren't people around to serve, and there needs to be, then the military can't ignore that. They have to square that off, and they do so by improving. That's the vision here. It's not to just gut the military, scorched earth. The end state of the boycott would be a healthier military, a more viable defense, because it's a problem that the military has to confront, and they have to do so by making themselves more attractive.
But, I think a lot of it is just we've turned the military into a social experiment, and it's a failed social experiment, unfortunately. I'm all for women doing whatever they can, but not in the military. As I've said many times on this show, the purpose of the military is to break things and kill people, and it takes a certain mentality and a certain kind of training to be able to do that. And I just think the social experiment is a mass failure. And when we get into a really, really big shooting war with the Chinese or whoever the next major player is, we're not dominating them like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq is we're going to be in trouble. I mean, I just do not see, the military that I see today is not the military I was in 40 years ago. It's just
not at all. It's an eroded shell of itself. And to your point about the social experiment, I agree. And the problem is that the military is a unique organization in that you must, for it to be viable, everybody has to sacrifice a little bit of their individual identity for the betterment of the unit, the groups, the corps, what have you. That is the whole premise of a military, is that you sacrifice for the betterment of the greater good of the organization. It's unlike many organizations within the government in that regard. So to have this increase and maybe overemphasis on the individual, it actually is a mutually exclusive aim to that of military esprit de corps and functionality.
Well, I mean, Millie definitely pulled back when it came to the pride stuff. And I feel that same way, Ryan, because I don't care about that. It's about the military and being a cohesive unit, not your gay pride flag. And it was so ridiculous how this was pushed in our face. So one of your op-eds, too, is the U.S. military second rate and loving it. So, and we have a brand new Joint Chief of Staff, General CQ Brown, and he came to Tyndall, and I got to meet him at a Military Affairs Committee event, and before he took over the helm, and but we just had Alan West on, and Alan West has come out. He is anti-General Brown because of these DEI issues being pushed down, and it's not about the quality and your capability of flying a fighter jet. It's the color and gender that you are. So why is the military pushing this nonsense? We got to have the best people in the roles. there's no way. If I had to fly a fighter jet, I would have crashed and burned. I can definitely fly a desk and take care of a general, but I know my abilities, Ryan. So tell me your perspective on all of this that they've been pushing and pushing.
Yeah, the point of the second rate and loving it. Thanks for the plug. That was I got a good chuckle out of that. Remembering that one, it is that it really comes from hubris, and it's a point that John mentioned earlier here in the segment, which is to operate with impunity, to not be held to account, to kind of just be off doing your own thing, and no one calling it into question. And the problem with that, mixed with this hubris of military leaders that feel they can do whatever they want because they can, is that we are becoming second-rate and loving it. And that is, for whatever the social topic du jour is that becomes almost the priority over the mission. And so a lot of people that take issue with these social reforms, it's not the spirit in and of itself. It's like attract more people. That's good. You get better talent pool. We all like that. The problem comes when it's these things that shouldn't be out prioritizing the mission, but do. And we kind of, in the article, parallel it to these other militaries abroad that we used to kind of mock and go, they're just a bloated, socialized jobs protection program, relatively ineffective, but they give the otherwise unemployable work. And then we looked at ourselves as like, okay, well, isn't that what we're becoming veritably in the military here in the States? Is like the defense of the nation and the betterment of the defense almost becomes a secondary or tertiary aim to some of these initiatives. And that's really what's disconcerting to us.
I agree 100% with that. For years ago, we used to laugh at the Russians, because the Russians fighter pilots couldn't go out and engage, without the ground controllers giving them permission and telling them where to go, basically. And yes, and that was our big advantage, Our guys could operate independently. They had the authority to do what they needed to do, and now we flipped that on the head. Now you got to call Washington D.C. while you're engaged trying to, track a guy, and you got to call
but
Washington DC to get permission to fire.
But General Milley's talking to President Xi to tell him that he's going to call him if there's something goes down.
Okay,
so don't forget that part.
Yeah. But Ryan, one thing I'd like to ask you about is you have a petition to dissolve the DoD Inspector General's office and probably move it somewhere else. The IGs, the idea behind the IG was the junkyard dog. You were going to have this independent group in there that was not in the chain of command. They were outside the chain of command, could come in and look at stuff independently, and tell you the way it was. And on the Navy side, here in Panama City, we have a Navy base that does a lot of research and development. And over the years, I've seen a lot of IG inspections, and it's basically a paper whipping exercise. And what happened to the junkyard dog thing, that idea and the independence of that office? And what is your petition? Yeah. What's the goal of your petition?
So the aim of the petition is to remove the IG system from the Department of Defense, because so long as it's subordinate to commanders within the department, it's never going to exercise true independence. And I saw that. I provide this vignette from my experience as an IG. I was subordinate to the commander of the installation I was the inspector for. So, and that person held my career in their hands, my assignment, my appraisal, what job I was going to go to next. So if I, as the IG, who's supposed to be this independent watchdog, go to my commander and go, hey, this is how it is, and he or she doesn't agree, well, I have two essentially mutually exclusive paths, one to truth and the other one to my career. And so often we see IGs opting for the latter, and understandably so. They're humans. They need a livelihood, and this is it. But it's so wrought throughout the department with those conflicts of interest that you can never have any kind of independence. That when you go to an IG, your chance of an investigation being carried out in good faith and with due diligence is now so extraordinarily low that you might as well not file. A lot of people do not file because they invite retribution while at the same time not getting any chance for justice. And so the petition is, we got to move it out of the DOD. We got to put it in the DOJ or something elsewhere where it's not consistently influenced by the department's undue command influences.
No,
so you almost need a prosecutor's type of a mentality where you're scored on how many prosecutions you have and the success of basically guilty verdicts. Where that's the incentive structure for the participants, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right now, there's zero incentive for an inspector general who works for the department to find against the department, right? It's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's just terrible. So one of the things that's on your website, walkthetalkfoundation.org, is the testimonials. So obviously you've helped so many people, Ryan. Are there any stories, vignettes you can share, that it's gone for the right way for the military whistleblower?
Yeah, I think a lot of the victories, there are a lot of different ways to define victory. First of all, of course, there's the substantiation, but a lot of times the victory is just having closure. So the problem with a lot of these cases is not only with the conflict of interest, but that they languish for months and a lot of times years. And if you're a victim of something, you're just looking to move on with life a lot of times. You're not looking to crush people or for vengeance or what have you. You just want it to be done and moved on. And as these cases go on and they're interviewed and re-interviewed and reports are come out and FOIAs are requested, blah, 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 and it goes on for years, it's really psychologically damaging for the person. So what we provide in that regard is, and a lot of the quote-unquote victories come from the case closures. And some are wins and some are not in terms of substantiation or not, or accountability or not. But it gives the person the ability to move on with their lives. And that's a win for a lot of people, just to be like, okay, I was wronged. There's closure. Maybe I saw the outcome, maybe not, that I wanted to see, but at least I can move on with my life now and call it in the past.
Well, I think it's wonderful what you're doing for people. Have you gotten some big dog support from some congressmen or senators out there that are helping you in this fight?
Some. There's a little bit of an incestual relationship there when it comes to Congress and the Department of Defense, because it comes to big money, especially when that money's coming from our military-industrial complex, which are in certain districts. So
yeah.
The Congress can be a little bit of a fickle friend in that regard. I'll tell you, the biggest support we've gotten, there's a committee in the Senate called the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. They oversee all inspectors general throughout the government. And they've been surprisingly big proponents of this movement, and we've worked with the Government Accountability Project in doing that. But as for individual representatives and senators, the response has been tepid at best, because they're very leery, I surmise, to rock the boat in terms of that relationship, which probably results in campaign dollars.
Right.
Well, I was hoping some of them, like Senator Tommy Tuberville, who actually took a principled stand, with his holds on all the generals. You see some hope for people like that. And I know you've got an MBA from Troy State, so hopefully Senator Tuberville is higher on your list.
Yeah, that was really fascinating for me to watch. You can debate the motives of his actions till the cows come home, but it was a refreshing change of pace to just see the Congress try and hold the military to account finally.
Right.
And what was also fascinating to me was to watch the military's reaction, which I found to be fairly disgustingly self-centered. Because
agree 100%.
You saw them go to the Hill clamoring about getting moved and paid and promoted, and at the same time, purporting the importance of our deference to our civilian leadership while they criticized them for not promoting. It was seethingly hypocritical, I found, and self-serving.
Well, as we wrap up this interview with the founder and president, retired Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Sweazey from WalkTheTalkFoundation.org, what has been the most satisfying thing of your, running this foundation, Ryan?
By far, people who come back to me and go, look, I had no one in my corner and you came along, so thank you. And so many people say that because it's true. They're left alone to fight for justice. Isn't that sad? The military tells them that's their duty to report wrongs, but when they do, they're totally gaslit. And so for people to come back and go, no one was on my side, especially when they said they would be, and you were, that I find to be incredibly rewarding.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for fighting for, our service members, Ryan, and we'll have you back because I love following you on LinkedIn. You just you duke it out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, my number one fan. Thanks, Veronica.
Yes. Have a happy New Year, Ryan. We'll talk soon.
You too. All right, thanks, John. Thanks, Veronica.
Happy New Year. When we come back, we'll be joined by Peter Feynman, our Florida National Committee man, and he's running to be chairman of the RPOF. We'll be right back.